Firstly, good afternoon to one and all. It gives me great pleasure to extend to you all a very warm welcome to all dignitaries for gracing this occasion, National 5-Day Faculty Development Program on recent advancements in computer science and technology, organized in Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College, Tirupati. So I would like to introduce myself. I am Purnima, working as an assistant professor, Department of Computer Science and Engineering in Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College, Tirupati. On this significant occasion of Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College, Tirupati, we are very glad to have a national level 5-day faculty development program with regard to recent advancements in computer science and technology. As the faculty development program is concerned with the delegates and participants today to enrich the knowledge of faculties through interaction with professional bodies from academics and industries. Yeah. In this regard, I would like to extend a warm welcome of all you for gracing this occasion. We are privileged to extend our hearty welcome to our beloved chairperson, Dr. Chadalavada Krishnamurthy sir, and organizers of 5-Day Faculty Development Program, Dr. T. Bhimarjuna Reddy sir, Dr. Naveen Kumar sir, Dr. S. Muzamil Basha sir, Dr. Gurvaya sir, and Dr. Mohan sir, our beloved academic advisor, Dr. Rajagopal sir, and respected director of Krishna Teja group of institutions, Dr. P. Bhaskar Patel sir, and our principal, Dr. P. Sanjeev Raidu sir, HODs of all departments, and my dear teaching and not teaching staff members of CRDC and outside old also. A very happy welcome to all of you for gracing this occasion. Now this is right time to invite our convener of this 5-day FDP program, Dr. S. Tulasi Krishna, Professor and Convener, Department of CSE in Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College, Tirupati. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, madam.
Yeah.
I am Dr. S. Tulasi Krishna, Professor in Department of Computer Science and Engineering from Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College, Autonomous, Tirupati, and convener of a national level 5-day faculty development program on recent advancement in computer science and technology. Honorable founder and chairman Dr. Chadalavada Krishnamurthy garu, resource persons Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy sir, academic advisor Dr. Rajagopal sir, director P. Bhaskar Patel sir, our beloved principal Dr. P. Sanjeev Raidu sir, head of the department Dr. A. Ram Mohan Reddy sir, administrative officer Mr. Krishna sir, HODs of respected departments, dear faculty members and participants, a very good afternoon to all and a warm welcome to all of you. I want to tell some valuable words about institute, department and FDP program. Chadalavada Ramanamma Engineering College Autonomous is established in the year 2004 with an intake of 244 undergraduate programs and 6 postgraduate programs by CVS Krishna Teja Charities under the patronage of Dr. Chadalavada Krishnamurthy, Chairman, is a well-known educationalist with the able objectives promoting quality technical education. The institute has been approved by the All India Council for Technical Education, permanently affiliated Jawaharlal Nehru Technology University, Anantapur, Andhra Pradesh, India. JKC Training Center has been functional since 2007 and producing its outcomes. The institute is conferred with an autonomous status from University Grant Commission in the year 2017 and NAAC A grade accreditation in the year 2018. The college also got ISO recognition, UGC recognition under 2F and 12B and achieved A grade from Government of Andhra Pradesh. The college offers Bachelor of Technology programs in Computer Science Engineering, Mechanical Engineering, Electronics Communication Engineering, and Electrical and Electronics Engineering. Masters in Technologies programs in Computer Science Engineering, CAD, CAM, VLSI, System Designing, Master of Business Administration, and Master of Computer Application. About the department, Department Computer Science and Engineering encompasses a variety of topics that are related to computation like analysis of algorithm, programming languages, programming design, software and computer hardware, computer science engineering as a roots in electrical engineering, mathematics and languages. The institute started the 4 years BTech course in computer science engineering in 2004 with an intake 60 seats. The intake has been grown to 120 seats in the 2005. Computer science engineering department has a well-known qualified faculty. The department is equipped with Andhra Pradesh Skill Development Corporation Excellence Center. We are also maintaining department library with containing textbooks, volumes, repeated journals, and other career-oriented books, and free Wi-Fi facility for students and faculty. Our department encourages faculty by frequently organizing faculty development program to enhance teaching skills and knowledge. Department maintains central air-conditioned laboratories with updated specification, and also projectors are placed in the labs and classrooms. The department has started Association of a Computer Engineer in 2006 with the mission to promote technical excellence by conducting the various competitions to students in technical as well as extracurricular activities to enhance the skills, which aim at a development of computer science professional with ethical values and a societal concern. Apart from the department has got a good placement records for its outgoing students in various leading software companies. About the FDP, I would like to thank you, our beloved chairman, sir, for providing all facility, the organizing national level 5-day faculty development program on recent advancement in computer science and technology. Today we are really very happy, sir. I am really happy for kind cooperation to let us learn the things through this platform. Till now, we say 418 faculties has been registered from various states of countries. Out of them, few faculties were registered from Assam, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, Rajasthan, Jharkhand, Madhya Pradesh, Delhi, Calcutta, Jammu Kashmir, from various regions across the country, for which we feel proud, as you are the reason to share the views of faculty. I request all participants to pay the serious attention to all the session of the experts from the prestigious universities and college, and make this session interactive by which knowledge sharing the enhancing is possible. At any time, you can raise your hand and interact with a resource person. At the same time, as you are professionals, we have to maintain dignity of the meeting and resource person. I hope this session will become a valuable, very interactive, and hope all participants are going to gain extensive details of subject knowledge along with the latest technologies. It's a practical example to enrich their concept in the field of computer science. Also, I hope it helps the faculty to enhance their teaching and learning skills with advanced technology in computer science and technology, and to faster research activities at their institution. Objectives of a program. The main objective of this program aimed for a research aspirant in computer science engineering to explore wide knowledge, research, basic idea, challenges related. The motivate teachers from engineering domains like computer science engineering and electronics, communication engineering, etc. to adopt a new relevant technologies. Learn the basic knowledge of threats and solution in a network. Suppose of data science is to find a pattern within a data. It uses a very statistical techniques to analysis and draw insight from the data. AI and IoT are a closely interwoven as a brain and
Tulsi Krishna, why is that not?
Madam.
Yes.
Sir,
okay. Okay, now okay.
Okay. Likewise, artificial intelligence can gather the data from the sensor in our world. Many of the comes from the Internet of Thinking. Artificial intelligence and IoT are closely interwoven as a brain and body or combination which many believe may become basis for an even a deeper learning than machine learning. Together, artificial intelligence and machine learning will play the massive role in how we use and monitor Internet of Thinking device. Expected outcomes, the curriculum containing and feasibility of including data science, artificial intelligence, Internet of Thinking, and machine learning related courses. The various laboratory exercises to carried out in this course adopted in curriculum. Ideas for a project research possibilities in this domain. To train teachers on artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Thinking, data science, analytics, and visualization. At the end of every session, we post feedback link. I request all of you submit the feedback, which is useful to mold the upcoming session much better. Once again, thank you very much, sir, and thank you for opportunity given to share my words. Thank you, sir. I hand over to session to Purnima.
Purnima.
Yes, sir.
Yes, yes, yes. You can speak. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir. Thank you for your introductory speech, sir. I would like to invite our HOD of CSE, Dr. A. Rammohan Reddy, sir, to share a few thoughts about this program, sir. Welcome, sir.
Good afternoon to all. Dr. Tulsi Krishna exhaustively covered what is there in the FDP. Now, I don't want to just repeat. I take 1 or 2 minutes only. It is already 2:28. Right. Honorable Chairman, Dr. Chitravada Krishnamurthy Garu, beloved advisor, Dr. K. Rajagopal Garu, Director, respected Dr. Bhaskar Patil Garu, our principal, Dr. P. Sanjeev Reddy Garu, all HODs and colleagues of CREC, all participants from different engineering colleges all over all states, and today's speaker, Dr. Bhimaraju Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, Department of CSE, IIT Hyderabad. I, Rammohan Reddy, HOD CSE. Welcome to all wholeheartedly to the national level a 5-day faculty development program on recent advancements in computer science and technology. Is being organized by Department of Computer Science and Engineering, Chadravada Ramanamma Engineering College, Tirupati. In our FDP, Day 1 speaker, Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, Department of CSE, IIT Hyderabad. His topic is Wi-Fi security, and in that threats and solutions is going to have a discussion. He has a vast experience in the teaching and as well as in the field of wireless communication. This session, I hope, will be fruitful and beneficial to all participants. And thank you for giving opportunity. Thank you, sirs. Purnima, I am transferring control to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you for your yes, sir, inspirational message, sir. Now, it consider it great pleasure to welcome our Honorable Principal of CREC, Dr. P. Sanjeev Raidu, sir, to speak few words on this occasion, sir. Yes, sir. Welcome, sir.
So, happy afternoon to all of you.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
sir. Is it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'm at the outset. I'm very happy to be part of this 5-day FDP on recent advancements in computer science and technology. So as a part of this, I am very happy and I congratulate the convener of the department and Dr. Tulasi Krishna and his team members and head of the department, Dr. Ram Mohan Reddy sir. So Honorable Chairman Chadalawada Krishnamurthy Garu, founder and chairman of this Krishna Teja Murthy Charity and Krishna Teja Group of Institutions. Chief Advisor Dr. K. Rajagopal sir, former Vice Chancellor of the JNT University, and our beloved Director Dr. Bhaskar Patel sir, and other faculty friends, and importantly the resource persons who have accepted and be the keynote speakers for these 5 days. And I wish all the best for all the participants who have registered. I heard that around 480 participants registered for this program. So especially the resource persons, Dr. B. Marjan Reddy Garu, Professor of CSE Department, IIT Hyderabad, Dr. R. Mohan Garu, Assistant Professor, CSE Department, NIT Tiruchirappalli, Tamil Nadu, and Dr. K. Guruvaya, Assistant Professor, CSE Department, IIIT Kerala, Dr. M. Naveen Kumar Garu, Assistant Professor, CSE Department, Sri Ramachandra University, Chennai, Tamil Nadu, and Dr. Muzamil Basa Syed, Associate Professor of CSE Department from Reva University, Bangalore, Karnataka. So I'm very happy and I wish this a great program for all the people which is on the need of the hour. It is a topics also very currently needed topics, Wi-Fi security, threats and solutions, concept of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So recent trends in artificial intelligence and machine learning. So, and recent data visualization with the Tableau. So all the 5 topics for 5 days are very much required for the day of the hour. So I request all the resource persons as well as the participants to best utilize of this opportunity, and I wish this program very grand success. So thank you, Ananda.
Yes, sir. Thank you so much for sharing such wonderful thoughts and ideas with us, sir. Respected Director, sir, I feel very happy to for joining you with us, sir, at this critical time. Now, this is right time to introduce our today's resource person, Dr. T. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir. Yeah. So it's my pleasure to read a brief biodata of Dr. T. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir. Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir, is currently working as a professor in the Department of Computer Science and Engineering at IIT Hyderabad, Tirupati, India. Coming to his educational background, sir received his bachelor degree in the Department of CSE in the year 2000 from Sir C.R. Reddy College of Engineering, Andhra University, West Godavari District, Eluru. Sir did his Master of Engineering in Computer Science and Engineering in the year 2002 from National Institute of Technology, Roorkela, Odisha, India. Sir was conferred PhD in 2007 from Indian Institute of Technology, Madras. Sir has published over 100 articles in referred international journals. Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir, is a recipient of Vishweshwaraya Young Faculty Research Fellowship at IIT Hyderabad and Innotics Research Fellowship Award for his PhD tenure at IIT Madras. He is a co-recipient of Top Cited Article Award from Elsewhere Publishers, Best Academic Demo Award at ComsNets 2018, and Best Poster Award at ICE CCI 2018 as well as 2015 conferences. Sir is a senior member of IEEE and a member of ACM and served as the General Co-Chair for National Conference on Communications 2018. Now, I request our today's resource person, Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir, to proceed over the session. Sir, I welcome you, Dr. Bhimarjuna Reddy, sir, to proceed over the session.
Thanks, Purnima, for introducing me. Let me share my presentation. Confirm me once you see it. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Make host, Purnima.
So, are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yeah, yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay, fine. Shall I proceed then?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, okay. Hope you are able to see my screen. Okay, so first of all, good afternoon to one and all. And before I proceed further with my talk, so let me thank the team at Chadalwada Ramanamma Engineering College for conducting this kind of FDP by involving people from different institutes as the resource persons, and also being it online, I could see that you are able to attract participants from all over the country. That is very good to hear. So title of my presentation is on Wi-Fi security, where I will be talking about some of the popular threats and some of the solutions to tackle them. So it is being an important topic. So I will try to give a sense of what are the different threats and what kind of solutions one has to apply to make yourself safe in this Wi-Fi or the cyber world. Okay. So this is my outline of this particular talk. First, I will give a brief introduction to Wi-Fi architecture. So for those who are not aware of, I'll just spend a minute on how Wi-Fi is used to provide a wireless connectivity in indoor environments. Then I will talk about why we have to care about Wi-Fi security, because we also have the security at the higher layers in the internet protocol stack. So I'll be talking about why we still have to bother about security at the link layer where the Wi-Fi protocol stack works. Then I will talk about multiple threats and attacks that are possible on Wi-Fi environments. And I will also talk about some of the standards that are out there to fix these attacks. And I will also talk about some of the vulnerabilities that are found over the years on the different flavors of the Wi-Fi security standards. And finally, I talk about very recent Wi-Fi security standard that is called WPA3. And I will briefly mention what it offers and how one can be more safe with the WPA3 compared to what we are using currently, which is WPA2 and other ones. So this is the brief outline. I hope all of you are able to hear me. So Purnima and others, could you please confirm? Is it everything okay? Okay. Shall I proceed? Tulsi, Krishna or Purnima?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You can proceed, sir.
Okay, okay. And also, yeah, if somebody having any doubts in between, yeah, feel free to stop me at any time. So I'll try to clarify then and there rather than waiting till the end. Okay. And also tell me how much time do I have? Purnima, I'm asking how much time do you have for this particular talk?
Actually, 1.5 hours session, sir.
Okay. So yeah, please tell me. So I have to stop it by what time? Yeah.
Okay, sir. Okay, sir. As you wish.
Okay, it is 1.5 hours from now, is it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And also I request all the participants to mute the microphone so that we can reduce any background noise here.
Microphone as well as video also mute, please, all of you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so let me get started. So what you see here in the illustration is a high-level architecture of Wi-Fi networks. So this is an example of enterprise or a campus Wi-Fi network, where you could see that there is a router or a switch using which you connect to ISP network. From there, you provide Wi-Fi coverage and even the LAN coverage to various devices. This particular illustration, what you see is there are two cells. One is cell 1 and other one is cell 2. The terminology is very similar to what we use also in cellular network, but the concept is the same, where we use base stations in the cellular networks, whereas here what we use are called Wi-Fi access points, or the APs we call them as, where each AP provides limited coverage in its neighborhood, and whichever the devices that are there in the neighborhood which are having good coverage, they can connect to the Wi-Fi access point for internet services or for connection from one cell to other cell, where you can expect to have Wi-Fi devices in the campus environment or in the enterprise network can talk with each other, not just all the time connectivity to the internet matters for us. So we use this word, the basic service set, also known as the cell, as the building block of the Wi-Fi network. And as you see, there are two kinds of devices. One is the Wi-Fi access point, that is what you can see it here. And the rest of the devices are called Wi-Fi clients or the Wi-Fi stations in 802.11 terminology. And if you look at in this illustration, what you see is the frame format or the packet format for Wi-Fi networks. So what you see is different fields. As you see on the left-hand side, it is the frame control field. So all the way up to payload and frame check sequence and all other things that are out there you can see. So what I want to highlight here is whenever the packets are coming from any device that you use, from the higher layers in the protocol stack like IP layer, the packets are delivered to the data link layer. In this case, I'm talking about using 802.11, which is popularly known as Wi-Fi, as the link layer technologies for sending the packets between wireless clients and the Wi-Fi access point. So here what happens is the payload, in this case, the payload is nothing but the IP packets from layer 3 in the protocol stack. So this particular payload, which is coming from the IP layer, is added as a content of these MAC packets. By adding other header fields, it is sent over to the wireless medium. In the context of the Wi-Fi security, as you see here, there are two ways we can send this particular payload. One is you can send the payload as it is without doing any further encryption at the link layer, or you can do encryption at the link layer using the Wi-Fi security standards like WPA2 or WPA3 and other things. That way, the IP packets coming from the IP layer can either be encrypted at the link layer by Wi-Fi, or if you are not using any Wi-Fi encryption at the link layer, the IP packets coming from the higher layer go as it is in plain text as they're getting carried over the wireless medium. So when I'm talking about Wi-Fi security, it basically involves how to encrypt the packets at the link layer, irrespective of whether the IP packets are already encrypted by the transport layer, where we use the TLS as the transport layer protocol, as the security protocol for encrypting the packets. So let me explain briefly how a Wi-Fi station joins Wi-Fi network. Okay, so what you see in this illustration is on the left-hand side, you are seeing a Wi-Fi station. Okay, and on the right-hand side, you have the Wi-Fi access point. And in the enterprise or in a campus environment, we have this something called a AAA server, which is basically provides authentication, accounting, and authorization services, using which the Wi-Fi stations which are in the campus environment will get themselves authenticated with this AAA server or Wi-Fi access point before they are allowed to access the campus or the enterprise environment. Whereas in the case of home networks, we don't have any separate AAA server kind of device, where the access point itself will act as like an authenticator, where on the station side you submit the passphrase or password that will be authenticated by the access point. After that, it lets the user to connect and start using the Wi-Fi network. So let me explain what is there in the illustration. Look at the beginning what happens. When you switch on the Wi-Fi radio, whether it is in your smartphone or in your laptop or any other device, what the Wi-Fi devices or the Wi-Fi clients do as the first step is sending something called a probe request packet. As the name says, the Wi-Fi client is probing the Wi-Fi environment for presence of any kind of Wi-Fi access points because they need somebody to serve them. So in this case, the Wi-Fi client is checking whether is there any Wi-Fi access point in its vicinity. For that, it is sending something called probe request. That is the first message that you can see it here. As a reply to the probe request, the access point sends a probe response where it includes its service set identifier, which is nothing but the name of the access point. Like at many of the places, you see the access point name. Like many times you keep either your name or the college name as the access point name. So that's what is being advertised as part of the probe response. Not only that, probe response also contain lots of other information that are related to the kind of Wi-Fi standards, security standards, and Wi-Fi QoS standards and Wi-Fi data rate standard that Wi-Fi access point is supporting. All that information is carried as part of these probe response packets that station receives. And in case if there are multiple access points in the neighborhood, each of the access points sends the probe response packets. After that, it is up to the station to decide, depending on the signal strength or any other parameter that is set at the station side, to decide which of the access point it wants to connect with it. For that, it sends something called authentication request. For that, the access point will be sending authentication response. But it is important to note down here that whatever that I'm showing it here as authentication request and authentication response, these are not truly the authentication that you expect when you submit your credentials. So this is also called something called null authentication. So this is there only as a backward compatibility with Wi-Fi's state machine. In other words, it is not doing anything except sending a pair of messages between station and access point. It is not real authentication. You can assume that it is a kind of a null authentication. After that, as you see in the illustration, the client is sending something called association request. So here, the client will basically telling to the access point that it wants to connect to the access point. Let's say in your campus, we have something like 802.11n. And if you are enabled WPA2, so then what happens is the client is telling to the access point that it want to connect to the access point over 802.11n, where it can also specify the kind of data rate the client can support and also the kind of the transfer power levels that it can use and other things in addition to the security standard that it can support. In this case, I am telling that client wants to connect to the access point over WPA2. Then access point, after getting this request, will be sending a response. Basically, if it is happy with accepting the client request as it is, then it will be sending successful authentication response. Otherwise, it will be giving some warning or kind of an error message. After the client has to do by getting the related parameters. After doing these messages, authentication and association request and association response, we do something called the four-way handshake for getting the IP address. It is called DORA, where we use typically a DHCP server for dynamically sending the IP address to the clients. It is very painful to assign statically the IP address to the clients. For that reason, many campus environment, we use a DHCP server. But if it is a home environment, the access point itself will act as a DHCP server, where in a particular subnet, it will advertise the kind of client that it can support by specifying certain IP range. If it is like a subnet is like 192.168.2.255, basically it can support, in theory, 254 devices under that particular access point. But for all practical purposes, most of the access point start giving issues when the number of clients are more than 20 to 50. So anyway, so this using this four-way handshake, which is called DORA, which basically discovery, offers, request, and acceptance. The station is finally got an IP address from the access point or from a DHCP server in the campus network. After getting IP address, now it is ready to communicate with other devices because it has not only the MAC address, now it also has IP address, it also has associated with the access point. Now it can start sending the plain text data. So make a note here. I'm saying that after getting an IP address, the messages that access point and client exchange between themselves are only in plain text. If you really want to have an encrypted communication between the client and access point, that is not possible at this stage, because as I was mentioning, so far what you have done is only a null authentication where no keys are exchanged between client and access points, and because of that, there is no possibility for a secure communication between the client and access point. If you want to have a secure communication, so we need to have further exchange of control messages between the station and the access point, where they both kind of do authentication followed by deriving keys, which are further used for encrypting and decrypting the data for back and forth communication between them. So a slight variation to what I just described is shown now, where rather than letting the clients sending the probe request and as a response to that access point is sending the probe response, it is also possible for access point directly sending broadcast beacon frames. So beacon frames are carrying the same information which are carried as part of the probe response. The only difference being the probe response are basically kind of a response message to the probe request, whereas beacon messages are more like a periodic messages which access points broadcast. Typically, it is at the granularity of once every 100 milliseconds, so that whoever the clients in the neighborhood, they can immediately see which are the access points available for connecting with that. So if you look at in terms of the communication requirements, the requirements are the same no matter what kind of communication environment that you are talking about. So if you look at these are the very classical requirements. First one of them being the confidentiality, where you want to make sure that only the sender and receiver should understand the content of the message. For that, what we do is we use the encryption mechanism, where we use the encryption key using which the sender encrypts. Using the decryption key, the receiver decrypt the message. So because other people who are listening to the channel, they don't have these kind of keys, they won't be able to successfully decrypt, even though they could be able to capture, because this is a wireless environment I'm talking here. The second requirement for secure communication is the message integrity. So what I mean by message integrity is whatever the message that sender is transmitting should reach the receiver as it is without getting altered during transmission from sender to the receiver. So that we want to make sure that message is not compromised during communication from sender to the receiver. That is also very important requirement. And other one is authentication, where we want to make sure that the sender and receiver should indeed know whom they are talking with each other. So they don't want to talk with somebody who is masquerading either as the sender or receiver. So that is very common in the internet, where we don't know really whether that so-and-so guy is the sender or not. So to address that, many times what we do is we use the digital certificates and others for authentication. For client side, we use the username and password, which you show offline, using which your campus network and the web servers authenticate clients. So the last and also equally important one is the access and availability. So whatever the network that you have set up for the users should be available for all the legitimate users, even though there could be the chances of some attackers trying to disrupt the communication that are happening in the network. So that is, these are the four very important requirements as part of the communication security is concerned. So it is also called popularly CIA at Trinity. So as you see, C stands for confidentiality, I stands for integrity, and A stands for access.
Put a question.
Yeah, please. Please go ahead. What is the question? Hello? Somebody wants to ask something. May I know what is it? Or shall I proceed?
Sir, you proceed, sir.
Okay.
Again.
Oh, is it not for me? Okay. I thought somebody wants to ask something. Yeah, but anyway, feel free to ask me anytime. Okay. So I don't want it to be like a one-way communication here. Okay. And this
Purnima,
is the main reason why I'm giving this talk. I kind of chosen to give this talk. So why is Wi-Fi security is important today? So it is all the more important today because if you see this particular bar graph, more than 50% of the traffic in the world is carried by Wi-Fi networks. So these are the two things that you can see where these two regions cover the kind of traffic carried by the Wi-Fi devices. Of course, the Wi-Fi only there in the last hop between your device and the Wi-Fi access point. After that, everything has to be carried by a broadband link or some other kind of link or fiber to the home kind of link that is out there. But on the last hop, if you look at it, more than the cellular and other kind of communication that you can expect, it is the Wi-Fi that is the predominant communication technologies that all of you use it. And if you look at even the today's talk that we are having it, so I'm sure more than 80% of you are attending this talk over your Wi-Fi network, not the 4G or 3G or your campus or enterprise LAN, that kind of thing that you have out there. So because Wi-Fi gives untethered access, even though when you are in like an indoor environment, because nobody likes to connect many wires to your devices. You want it to be more and more untethered. So let's look at various attacks that are possible on Wi-Fi. I will briefly discuss each of these attacks in the following slides. The first one is very challenging one to detect, that is called eavesdropping, where somebody is listening to what you are communicating in the wireless medium. And the second one is called man-in-the-middle kind of attacks. There are various forms of man-in-the-middle attacks. Even in the internet also, we hear about this word man-in-the-middle. And the second one, or even the third one that you see it here, is also comes under a kind of a man-in-the-middle attack, where we are talking about somebody is setting up a Wi-Fi hotspot or a rogue access point and trying to masquerade as a legitimate access point that we expect at public places or in our campus or enterprise environment. And the last one is also very prevalent form of attack in the internet, where we could have similar kind of attack also on your Wi-Fi network. And if you look at in terms of the tools that are available for hacking or kind of launching attacks on Wi-Fi networks, there are tons of tools that are available. Many of them are either open source or free, that you can download and modify them to make it more powerful, or you can start using it because many of them are free. Whatever that I listed out here, some of them are still actively maintained. And if you have to tell you a couple of things that you have to really pay attention to here. So the first two that I mentioned here, these are extremely powerful and also has a lot of support from the community. So that you may also ask why somebody developing these kind of tools. So many times these tools are developed for good reasons. Basically, before some attackers start attacking and compromising your network administrator should make sure that your network is free of those kind of attacks. That is, these tools also help you to harden your network before somebody else compromise and cause devastating effect on your network. That way, there's a lot of community support for these tools. And so this slide is very interesting one, and I hope all of you are able to easily connect with this. And it has two parts. If you look at on the left-hand side, what I'm showing is when you switch on your Wi-Fi in your iPad or your smartphone, so you can see the list of networks that are available in your neighborhood that you can choose. As you see here, out of these 6 networks that you see here, 2 of them are configured in open mode. Open means anybody can connect to these networks without providing any login credentials or the password or passphrase here. So that's what you can see. Whereas for the remaining 4 networks that you see here, you need to somehow get this password for you to really connect to that for you to really connect with that particular Wi-Fi access point. I hope all of you are able to understand this part on the left-hand side. And what I'm showing on the right-hand side is when you go to a public environment like airports or shopping malls, you see a lot of public Wi-Fi hotspots available, like hotspots from operators like BSNL or Airtel or Reliance Jio. So they have started deploying lots of Wi-Fi hotspots in the public environments. And what I'm showing here is one such provider of public Wi-Fi, which is Boingo. They typically provide the service in airports and other public places throughout the world. So as you see, this operator is providing one complimentary Wi-Fi, which is free for anybody to connect, where you have the limited speed up to 5 Mbps. Whereas you want to really have a very high speed, you have to pay some money for you connect with this particular Wi-Fi access points that are deployed out there. But the point I want to make here is, there are very commonly all these public Wi-Fi access points that you see, they're configured in open mode. So again, I'm repeating this. All the public Wi-Fi hotspots that you encounter when you go to any public place, they are configured in open mode. When I say open mode, you don't require any password to connect with these Wi-Fi access points. Well, irrespective of whether it is a free or paid, it doesn't really matter, but all of them are configured in open mode. So the reason why it is configured in the open mode is they want you to quickly onboard to the Wi-Fi access point. After you are onboarded to the Wi-Fi access point, there will be like a captive portal that takes you into their login page, where you have to provide maybe the OTP or something by providing your email address or your mobile number. After that, they kind of either charge you or they can let you freely. But onboarding a user to the Wi-Fi network, and after that, all the communication between the client and the access point, it always happens in open mode. That means the packets that are exchanged between the Wi-Fi client and the Wi-Fi access point in these open Wi-Fi environments, they always go in plain text. If you recall my discussion earlier about the link layer takes the packets from IP layer and decides whether to encrypt or not. So all in the case of these open public Wi-Fi access points, all the time the IP packets that are coming to the link layer, they go in plain text without getting encrypted. That if somebody is out there curious to figure it out what is happening, they can easily snooping into what is happening, because at the link layer, there's no encryption applied for these public Wi-Fi hotspots. I hope this part is clear to all of you. If not, please feel free to ask me if you have any questions. Let's look at what one can do on these public open Wi-Fi hotspots. Since the communication is happening here in encrypted fashion, as you see here, the client is connecting to the Wi-Fi access point without having any encryption at the link layer. And after that, access point will be sending the data over an internet connection to a remote web server. So here, unless you apply encryption at the higher layers in the protocol stack, all the communication that are happening between the client and the web server go in the plain text. So you can use the tools like Wireshark, TCP dump, and Air dump and other thing to snoop into this Wi-Fi environment. And these tools make it very easy for you to snoop into and collect all the packets that are exchanged between this user and the web server. So this is a kind of a serious attack, because it is a kind of affecting the confidentiality of the data exchange. Because the client and web server are not using any encryption mechanism here, the confidentiality is affected just like that. There's nothing that you are doing it here to provide confidential, because it is an open Wi-Fi network. And there's an interesting new study that came out in 2018 that kind of observed that this free Wi-Fi that is launched by Railway and Google in India at most of the railway stations has led to skyrocketing of so many cyber attacks, especially the ransomware attacks in India. And if you look at the configuration of these free Wi-Fi or the open Wi-Fi that is there out in these various railway stations, these are also configured in open mode. That way, whenever you go to these railway stations, you can identify these railway Wi-Fi access points and you can immediately log into them. Of course, after that, they may ask you to provide you your mobile number to get OTP. But as I was mentioning earlier, at the link layer, the communication between the access point and your smartphone happens in the plain text. So that way, there's a chance that somebody could snoop into this communication and also launch other kind of man-in-the-middle attacks. But the reason why this has led to spike in cyber attacks has nothing to do with the open Wi-Fi. This could even happen with even the closed or secure Wi-Fi as a free or paid service. The main reason why these attacks happened is it is a noble initiative of Indian Railways with Google to provide free Wi-Fi. But unfortunately, most of the users are not that literate when it comes to cyber security. That way, people, if you don't follow the digital hygiene when you are surfing internet, so you may end up installing all these apps which wants to snoop into your communication, or you may start accessing the websites which may start installing the malware or ransomware in your device. So that is the main reason. So because of poor digital hygiene followed by the people, so and the internet being free and you are waiting for your next train, so it has led to the cyber attacks. But one can also launch other kind of man-in-the-middle attack because it is poor, because it is an open network here. So yeah, so the second kind of attacks that are possible, as I was mentioning earlier also, is man-in-the-middle attack. As you see here, what you see is here the attacker or the hacker is a kind of positioning himself or herself between a Wi-Fi client and a remote web server. Sometimes this guy positions himself between the Wi-Fi client and the access point as well. So here there are multiple kinds of these man-in-the-middle attacks. I will be enumerating them in the following slides. But the reason why this kind of man-in-the-middle attack is possible because of setting up these rogue access points, where the attackers can set up these rogue access points and start launching these kind of attacks, where these attacks are possible both on open networks and also on the secure networks, where the attacker could compromise confidentiality and also the integrity of the message, where the attacker can also add or modify the data when it is passing between the client and the web server. So let me explain how we can launch different man-in-the-middle attacks here. So the first kind of the man-in-the-middle attack that one can launch here is possibly using something called ARP poisoning. I think those who are working in networking field, they might have heard about the word ARP, which stands for Address Resolution Protocol, which when you specify or when a client or whenever a device asks what is the MAC address of somebody's IP address, so other devices that are present in the network will tell the MAC address corresponding to the given IP address. That is the purpose of ARP. We also have something called a reverse RP, where you do the inverse of this by providing the MAC address to get the IP address. So look at this illustration to better understand how one can launch this man-in-the-middle attack by using ARP poisoning or ARP spoofing, it is also popularly known as. Where at the top we have one genuine access point. Okay, this is a genuine access point, and it is where we have the communication happening between the client and the server through the genuine access point. So now the attacker here, I'm calling the attacker as Trudy, it wants to launch this man-in-the-middle attack, where the attacker wants to see that all the communication between Alice and Bob passes through Trudy, where she wants to figure it out what Alice and Bob are exchanging between themselves. So what Trudy can do is, Trudy can send these unprovoked ARP messages to Alice and Bob, where to Alice it tells that Bob's MAC address is its own MAC address. Similarly to Alice, it tells that its MAC address is, sorry, to Alice it tells that Bob's address is its MAC address. To Alice it's, to Bob it says that Alice MAC address is its own. That means to Alice it is telling that it is me who is Bob. To Bob it is telling that it's me which is Alice. That way, whenever Alice is communicating, these messages will get delivered to Trudy, even though Alice indeed wants to communicate with Bob. And vice versa happens when the Bob is communicating with Alice. Unknowingly, Bob messages get delivered to Trudy, even though Bob indeed wants to communicate only with Alice. So this is possible because of our snooping or poisoning, where Trudy is kind of telling to Alice and Bob that, okay, I am Bob to Alice, I am Alice to Bob. So here telling I am Bob to Alice and I am Alice to Bob is possible by specifying the IP address, MAC address corresponding their respective IP addresses. This is one kind of man-in-the-middle attack. So there is another man-in-the-middle attack which is very possible and also very prevalent, is called evil twin hotspot. This is possible in all the public places and also possible in enterprises, campus environments, and also possible even at your home. Where, look at what I wanted to convey here, where we have a genuine access point and the client is communicating with a genuine access point here. But what is possible here is attacker can set up a fake access point. We are using the word evil twin here because, for example, let's take an example of genuine AP. So for example, if this your college, that is, let's assume that the Chadalawada Ramanamma College decide to have the naming for their access point as CRC. That is the genuine access point that you expect when you go to the campus, right? Now, what this attacker can do is, attacker will be setting up his or her own device with access point name as CRC. And assume that attacker has internet connection, because at the end, many times all the user wanted to only have the internet communication. So that way, assume that even attacker also has some backend connection. It could be like a 3G or 4G link that is possible with your Wi-Fi device that you have with you. Now what happened here is the attacker has created an evil twin, basically a rogue access point in our campus environment. And there are two ways, there are two things that are possible here. And one thing is, this access point is configured in the open mode. In that case, this guy also configures this rogue access point also in the open mode. That way, any user who is coming to the campus think that even this evil twin access point is also a genuine access point, because it also has the same network name as the genuine access point and it is also configured in open mode. But all the traffic from this client now passes through this particular rogue access point, and now we are at the mercy of the rogue access point. Either this rogue access point can tamper with the message or just snoop into the message, or it can even block the messages. Now we are at the mercy of the rogue access point. The second variant that is possible is the secure mode. If it is a secure mode, in that case, whatever the password. So here I'm talking about a configuration where we are using something called WPA2 PSK, which is not recommended for campus environment. We are supposed to use WPA2 enterprise, but if we are using WPA2 PSK to reduce cost and other things, In that case, whatever the password that is out there, because everybody in the campus will know the password, that way even the attacker or a student wanted to play some mischief can also configure this rogue access point and set the password exactly as the same here. That way, if anybody is trying to connect to the campus environment, they could start connecting even with this particular rogue access point. So the users don't feel any difference. So that way it is a very powerful attack, and it is possible at most of the public places, because most of the public places what you use is the WPA2 PSK if at all you are using some passwords, or you don't even use that. You configure it in the open mode because there is a challenge in providing the passwords, sharing the passwords with the new users who are coming to that Wi-Fi environment. This is the second variant of man-in-the-middle attack. And there is another variant of man-in-the-middle that is called a multi-channel man-in-the-middle attacks, where interestingly what happens here is genuine access point is not bypassed here. Still the victim user traffic goes through the genuine access point, but now interestingly the attacker positions himself or herself nicely between the victim client and the victim access point. That way you can snoop into what is happening between the genuine client and genuine access point. So that way it is also very powerful. In this case, the attacker need not to know what is the password of the genuine access point and other thing, because he is not doing anything. Whenever the user wants to authenticate with the access point, the victim's credentials are simply passed on to the genuine access point. That is a kind of acting more like a relay, but not only he can do the relaying, it also can manipulate the messages, or it can even block the messages. So it is also a variant of man-in-the-middle attack, where the thing here is these two access points are configured on two different channels. This is done many times to make sure that the victim doesn't reach the genuine access point because they are closely located from each other. So many times in the Wi-Fi environment, let's say we are talking about a very big hall or big like railway station kind of environment, signal can really travel long distance. In that case, when the attacker is trying to launch this fake access point, there's a high chance that user may still start connecting to the genuine access point. If you want to address this problem, use two channels where you start asking the user to attach to the fake access. So let me explain quickly what one has to do when you use this Wi-Fi in public environment. One of the highly recommended solution or kind of a recommendation for using virtual private networks. Basically use VPN to make your public Wi-Fi connection secure. So what VPN does is, look at here what I'm talking about. You have your device on the left-hand side. There could be a VPN server somewhere out on internet. So what happens, even though you are connecting to this VPN server over unsecure access point or even a fake access point that attacker has deployed in between, what could be happening here is the packets that comes to this particular VPN server, or even for that matter, the packet that comes to the Wi-Fi access point, first get encrypted even at the IP layer or at the TLS layer. That means by the time the packets are given to this link layer, we are already encrypting them. So that way, if the attacker gets hold of these messages that are exchanged between yourself and the Wi-Fi access point, there could not be a much issue here, because the attacker doesn't have the encryption keys using which the packets are encrypted at the IP layer or at the TLS layer. So because of that, there is not much damage that one can do on the communication happening between the device and the remote connection that you have with the internet up there. So that way the VPNs are highly recommended, and there are multiple ways you can get the VPN. Again, there are public VPN providers, they charge some money for you to give you this kind of VPN connection, or most of the campuses may have the VPN connection. That way you connect to your campus VPN server and browse internet through your campus VPN server, especially when you are trying to browse in public environments. And other thing is, again, highly recommended And increasingly, many website administrators started enforcing the users to connect to their websites always on HTTPS, that is a secure version of Hypertext Transfer Protocol, which works at the application layer using TLS at the layer between application layer and transport layer. And also you're supposed to turn off the file sharing so that somebody forcibly injecting some files, especially the file that installs some malware or ransomware in your device, can be avoided if you turn off file sharing in your device. And there are some recommendations on what you should not do in these public environments. One of the things is you should not let your Wi-Fi devices connecting to these open networks in auto connect mode. So don't ever let your Wi-Fi configured to connect these Wi-Fi networks which are configured in Wi-Fi in automatic mode. So always let them suggest you what are the names that are available. That way you can take information about connecting to them or not. And also many apps, when you are browsing in these public environments, you don't know whether the app is securely sending the data or not. So one way to make sure that app is sending the data securely or not is try to open this app in your browser. In the browser, you can check for HTTPS padlock. If so, then you can start browsing this app. And also better turn off your Wi-Fi radio if you are not using it. This not only helps you to secure your device whenever you are not using it, it also helps you to save your Wi-Fi. It also helps you to save the battery of your smartphones and other devices, because Wi-Fi also consumes good amount of the battery, and it consumes even whether the packets in the environment belongs to you or not. And other one is you are not supposed to click on unexpected links or attachments or pop-ups, especially when you are in these public environments. You are not supposed to ever click on this, but again, especially when you get these kind of pop-ups in public environment, you should be extremely cautious. Better avoid even opening them. And also, if you are having these websites that carry sensitive information like your healthcare data, or e-commerce data, or your credit card data, avoid using or doing these transactions when you are in the public environments. Or when I say public, I'm talking about you doing these transactions in an environment which is uncommon for you in your day-to-day life. So whenever we are going to some places, you better avoid it. But at your workplace and at places on like on your 4G or 3G connection, because that you do all the time, it is a kind of fine, but not in unknown or public Wi-Fi environments. And the last kind of threat that is on Wi-Fi networks is called denial of service attack. And again, on DDoS or even DOS, there are many flavors that are possible. One of them is called a frequency jamming, where the attacker here can use jammer to launch these jamming signal on the wideband on which your Wi-Fi networks typically work. That way, the entire communication on the Wi-Fi networks is disrupted. Nobody can make any useful communication, especially when the jamming is done. And this jamming is very common, especially you see when our politicians or any security related meetings are happening. The security personnel use the jammers to make the signals unavailable for both Wi-Fi, cellular, and any kind of radios. Okay. And the second kind of denial of service attack is called spoof de-authentication or dissociation messages. The idea here is the attacker can launch these something called de-authentication or disassociation messages. If you recall my earlier slide on how a Wi-Fi client connects to the Wi-Fi access point, I was talking about something called null authentication followed by association request and association response. That way, there is a handshake that happens between the client and the access point whenever the client is connecting to the access point. So what attacker can do is attacker can launch something called a de-authentication or disassociation messages, which are typically launched by the access point or whenever the access point feels it wants to de-authenticate or disassociate. That is like a genuine case. But in this case, what happens is attacker kind of exploits these well-defined messages that are supposed to be transmitted by the genuine access point. Rather than the genuine access point transmitting this message, the attacker device transmit this device on behalf of the access point. On receiving these messages, the clients that are connected with the access point get disconnected from the access point. That way, it is as if somebody kind of taking off you from the network on which you are currently doing the activities. So there is a very popular tool that all of you can do it if you have a this laptop with a Wi-Fi radio that is kind of support this particular tool. It is called AirCrackNG. Like look at here, this particular command, where what you are doing is you are using the AirPlay NG, and where you are actually kind of saying that this is the access point on which you wanted to launch the de-authentication. And this is your Wi-Fi interface name. So basically what this particular command is telling you is send 500 de-authentication messages on the access point named victim using the interface mon0. That way, this attacker device transmit these 500 de-authentication messages to on the channel in which the victim access point is operating. So after these messages are transmitted, all the devices that are connected to that particular access point will get de-authenticated, and they have to again start authenticating the access point. Again, by repeating this command, or by, let's say, you can put in a loop, let's say once in every second, let's say. So by repeatedly executing this instruction on your computer, you can make the victim access point unavailable for its genuine users, because every 1 second the access point is a kind of forcing, the victim is kind of forcing all the clients connected with this victim access point going off and again reconnecting, again terminating and reconnecting. So that is the kind of things. Again, there are many variants where you can also specify which access point by specifying the MAC address of the access point. And you can also specify, and if you don't like one particular user connecting with your access point, you can launch a targeted denial of service attack on that particular user connected with access point whose MAC address is so and so. So all these kind of things are possible. Earlier I talked about evil twin, and a variant of evil twin is the black hole evil twin, where the rogue access point, rather than forwarding the packets of the client to the genuine access point or directly to the internet, it blocks the packets, basically it drops the packet. So it is called a black hole evil twin. The last one is a battery exhaustion, where what we can do is we can send ping packets with the payload of very high size, large size. So when you launch ping packets on a particular device that is connected with the access point on which you are also connected, so you are kind of forcing other device to spend more and more energy, because each ping packet has a response packet coming from other side. That we are kind of exhausting the battery of the other device that is there in your Wi-Fi brand. As you see, there are many different flavors of the man-in-the-middle attack, and also there are many different flavors of denial of service attacks. All these are possible on different generations of the Wi-Fi networks. And one other thing one has to be also cautious about Wi-Fi network is whenever you are trying to configure your Wi-Fi access point on over HTTP. So though I don't know whether you own any access point or manage your access point in your home and other places. Very often this is how the admin console for the access point look like, especially true for home access points, where you specify the web server, which basically help you to connect to the access point for doing kind of parental control or changing the security setting, changing the transmit powers and other things. But very often, as you see, there is no secure connection here, and it is happening over unsecure. So if any attacker is snooping onto the communication between the client and the access point, because now this communication is happening over unsecure channel, because we are not using HTTPS. There is no HTTPS here. We are using only HTTP. So the attacker can see the username, password that you submit here. After that, attacker can also use the same username, password to connect and do damage to your Wi-Fi access point, or it could even hijack your Wi-Fi access point. To address many of the attacks that I was talking about in the previous slides, the IEEE 802.11 working group, along with the Wi-Fi Alliance, came up with a series of security standards over the last 20 plus years. So in 1997 itself, something called a WEP came, and immediately many researchers found that WEP security was broken. To address that, Wi-Fi Alliance came up with something called WPA as a stopgap arrangement, and people also found many issues with the WPA2, and in 2004 itself, WPA2, that is also known as 802.11i security standard, has come out. And we have been using 802.11i as of today. Even currently, I'm connected over WPA2 enterprise in my campus environment. I think most of you might have connected if you are at home environment using WPA2 personal. It is also called WPA2 PSK. So that is there for the last 15 years. But over the years, again, many security vulnerabilities and attacks have been demonstrated on WPA2. Still, it is a secure standard, but it is not that safe to use WPA2. To address that, in 2019 and even 2020, again, the Wi-Fi Alliance came up with the WPA2, again, personal, and WPA3 enterprise, using which we can address a lot of issues that are out there in WPA2 and have more secure Wi-Fi experience. And again, so if you look at it in a nutshell, what WPA does, WPA, especially I'm talking about WPA2 here, there are two variants. As I was mentioning, one is the enterprise variant and the other one is the personal variant. Especially the enterprise one is of very much interest for us because these are the ones that are used in enterprise and campus environments where you provide Wi-Fi coverage for hundreds and thousands of users with the same network name. Like in a college or in a public place or in enterprise, you want all the users to have the connection to the, no matter where in the campus environment or in enterprise environment you are sitting or you are moving in. So for that, it uses something called 802.1x, which is a port-based access control scheme, where it defines something called controlled and uncontrolled ports, using which you can decide whether user to start accessing the campus network or the internet connection, or you want to block it if the credentials are not correct. So this 802.1x uses something called EAP, which stands for Extensible Authentication Protocol, which is a kind of envelope which supports various kind of authentication and key exchange mechanisms. Many times what we use is something called EAP PIP. For example, at IIT Hyderabad, we use EAP PIP using Microsoft CHOP for providing the user credentials and letting the user communicate with the access point with username and passwords. But one can also use EAP TLS, where we are using the digital certificates for clients and asking the access point and client authenticate with each other using digital certificates rather than using usernames and passwords. And this WPA2 uses AES standard. Again, we use the same AES, which stands for Advanced Encryption Scheme, which is a symmetric encryption mechanism that you use in internet. When you're talking about HTTPS, we also use the same AES standard for encrypting and decrypting the message. Same thing also being WPA2 for encrypting the messages at the link level between the access point. this AES offers both confidentiality and integrity. As you recall, I was telling about confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But yeah, we can have confidentiality and integrity using AES, but you cannot get availability using AES, because availability is something that is done by launching denial of service attacks that cannot be addressed by using any kind of cryptographic mechanism that I'm showing here. So let me skip the discussion on WPA because it is there only here for historical purposes. So let me briefly show you what happens as part of WPA2 Enterprise. So because WPA2 Enterprise offers highest level of security in Wi-Fi environment compared to WPA2 Personal that use at homes and other small places. There are four pages in WPA2 Enterprise before users start having a secure data exchange with the access point. The first page is the discovery phase, so which I described earlier also when as part of when the client is connecting to the access point, where the probe request, probe response, null authentication followed by association request and association response. So that is nothing but the discovery page. After that, we do these two-way authentication where the station and the access point want to authenticate with each other. Rather than letting access point doing all this authentication with the client, we are using this AAA server that is also called authentication server, where the authentication server does the authentication of the access point with the clients, not only one access point, all the access point that we deploy in the campus environment. It is a two-way authentication. After authentication, both the client and the access point exchange keys which they want to use for encrypting the data. That is happening in the fourth phase. That way, after discovering the security capabilities and transmission capabilities in the phase 1, phase 2, the client and access points do the mutual authentication. After that, they exchange security keys for encrypting the data and decrypting the data. That is happening in phase 3. Finally, using the keys that are agreed upon, both the client and the access point will be encrypting and decrypting the data. Also pay attention here. This key is available only at the access point and the client. That way the messages are only encrypted and decrypted at the link level. So if you want to have end-to-end encryption, that means all the way from client to the end system, then you should be using a TLS, which operates at a layer between transport layer and application layer. Of course, we can have TLS packets which are already encrypted. Again, encrypted here at the link level. It is like a double encryption, you can say. But at the end of this link, the inner encryption, I mean the outer encryption, because first you do the TLS encryption, on top of that you are doing second level encryption. After that, the outer encryption will be repealed, and again you have the TLS message that will be passed on to the other end, and that happens like this. And if you look at WPA2, I was talking about both the client and access point agree upon the keys for securely encrypting and decrypting the message. Actually, there are lots of keys. Maybe it is too much of a detail, but at the high level, this is what happens. If you look at, there are two ways to obtain or get the keys. And if you are talking about WPA2 Enterprise, where I was mentioning about the mutual authentication of the client and access point, that's what happens. After that, they have a common key using which they derive the session keys. So then in WPA2 PSK, this is what you will be using it at home access points, or let's say if you're configuring a hotspot in your smartphone where you wanted to share your 4G or 3G data to other devices in your neighborhood, then you'll be creating a hotspot in your smartphone, right? In that case, you will be using the WPA2 in PSK mode. Here, there is no separate authentication server, but the access point has to provide the key by some other means of communication with the clients. Many times you tell orally that, okay, this is the password to connect with this access point. And here it is important to note that it is a one-way authentication. Only the clients are getting authenticated by the API, and there is no authentication of API by the clients. Unlike in WPA2 Enterprise, where it is a mutual authentication, where clients are authenticating the APIs and APIs are authenticating the clients. And yeah, so these are the keys, and whether it is WPA2 PSK, this is the PSK case, and this is the enterprise. Whether it is a WPA2 PSK or WPA2 enterprise, in both the cases, we end up with something called pairwise master key. And this key, along with the MAC address of the access point, the MAC address of the station, and a nonce, which is basically a number that is used only once. It is nothing but a random number. Random number given by the access point and another random number given by the station are used as input to a pseudo random function to generate PTK, which is called pairwise temporal key, which is further split into three parts. One is called a key confirmation key, other one is the key encryption key, and other one is the temporal key. So this is a key that is used very often. This is a key that is extensively used to encrypt and decrypt the IP packets that are coming from higher layer. Whereas the KEK used for securely sharing the broadcast key with the clients that are connected to the access point, and key confirmation key is used as part of the four-way handshake, which happens as part of this authentication process, where both client and access point derive a common key for further communication and install the PTK. So this is how the authentication happens in summary. Let's look at, I have the station, access point, and the authentication server. Initially, the access point is not letting the station send their data over the control ports. It is, the station can only connect with the authentication server and provide the username and password for authentication. Otherwise, the client is not allowed to go through the internet and do browsing or connect even with other stations. That is blocked at the beginning. Then what happens is the access point is sending something called EAP request identity. As a response, the client is sending something called EAP response identity, which is specific to the EAP type specific. For example, if it is like EAP PEEP, so then it will have a message that is specific to EAP PEEP standard. So then both the client and the authentication server exchange messages that are specific to the two-way authentication protocol they have agreed upon. In this example, it is being shown that they wanted to use EAP TLS, where we are issuing the digital certificates for clients and the access point. In this case, not access point, it is to the authentication server, because we assume that all access points are under same administrative control. Then both of them do the mutual authentication and know that they are talking with the right people. If not, the authentication fails. So that means with the rogue access point, let's say if somebody set up a rogue access point, then authentication won't be successful. Then as a side effect of this mutual authentication, the authentication server gets something called PMK, and even the client also independently gets the same PMK. Then the authentication server pushes the PMK to the access point, because as I was mentioning, the encryption is only at the link, on the link between the station and AP. So because of that, there is no use of PMK at the authentication server. For that reason, authentication server pushes the PMK that is specific to a client and AP's association to the respective access point. So in summary, this is what happening when you're talking about WPA2 enterprise case, where we are using EAP TLS as the underlying mutual authentication protocol. So whatever I described earlier about probe request, probe response, null authentication, association request, they're all there. After that, access point is sending EAP request and response, where we identify what kind of authentication protocol that we wanted to use. or you start getting, or you're kind of getting ready to send the real messages. So this is the PTK that is used for the rest of the communication to securely send broadcast data between the client and access point, and also to send the unicast data between the client and access point. Where for broadcast data, we use the group key. For unicast data, we use the TK, that is the temporal key. See here. So after the client and access point have the session keys, that is the PTK, the PTK is used to securely send IP packets. In this case, the plain text data is nothing but the payload that is coming from higher layer. Let's assume that this is the IP packet that you wanted to send to other side in a wireless medium. So what the client, assume that the Wi-Fi client wants to send this IP packet to the access point, then what happens is the client uses its packet number as a random, and it uses the TK, that is a temporary key that is used for encrypting the unicast data. So these two has input to a mixer to get a key, the key stream. Okay, so when you mix these two together, you get the key stream. So this key stream, when you do XOR with the plain IP packet, which is in the plain text, you will be having the encrypted data. So when you are sending the encrypted data, you also send the nonce that is used by the client to the access points. So that way, at the access point, we will have not only the nonce, we will also have the encrypted data. So what the access point does is, access point again will use its own TK. And anyway, we have supplied the nonce, so it will take that as input to the mixer. The mixing function is the same at the client and the access point. So that way, by using the same TK and nonce, the access points also generate exactly the same key stream. So when you take the encrypted data and you are XOR with the key stream, you will get back the plain text.
Sir, nothing, sir. It is clear.
Hello?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, tell me, Purnima.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, it is visible, sir.
Okay, okay, good. Good.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Okay, also there are lots of attacks over the years people have discovered that are possible on WPA2 as well. Even though it is one of the highly secure Wi-Fi standard that is out there, even there are attacks possible. And one thing is outrightly possible, that is the eavesdropping, especially when you configure it in the open mode. I was saying in the public environments, you configure it in the open mode. That way we are not really using the power of WPA2 by configuring open mode. So when I say it is open means you are not using WPA2 at all. Of course, of late many people are using HTTPS. That helps you to a greater extent, but still one can even get malware and ransomware installed over a secure HTTPS. If you start downloading and browsing malicious websites and apps which are kind of injected with this malware. So that way, HTTPS doesn't guarantee that your computer is free of viruses and malware. It only says that the link that is used between the client and the remote server is secure. But the server or the kind of device that you are trying to connect with on the other end, if it is a kind of mischievous, then you end up getting whatever they wanted to do with your device. That you should be very careful in visiting unknown links and installing apps which are kind of unknown for you. You should look at the source of the publisher, and if you don't trust the source, or if you don't know the source of this app publisher, better not to use it. And another attack that is possible in WPA2 is the on this WPA2 PSK, that are the man-in-the-middle attacks. I was talking about even in the beginning, where one can create these rogue or malicious access point with the name of the access point of the genuine things in a campus or enterprise environment. And because it is PSK, the password is known to everybody. And the attacker also sets the same password on the rogue access point and start getting all the traffic streamed or kind of moving through the attacker's device rather than through the genuine access point in the environment. And we also have something called offline dictionary attacks, where it's like more like kind of a cracking passwords, where you use a dictionary with millions of passwords, and you start seeing whether we can crack the WPA2 PSK password. So it is possible because there's something called four-way handshake that you use it as part of the PSK, where it is using which the attacker can actually launch these offline dictionary attacks and recover the PSK. That is a very dangerous thing out there. And very recently, the researchers from KU Leuven have found that many generations of the Wi-Fi devices suffer from something called a crack attack, which stands for key reinstallation attack, where you trick the client devices to reinstall the same key. So one of the golden rule of thumb in security is you should never ever reuse the key. By reusing the key, you are helping the job of attacker easy, because now there are multiple packets which are encrypted using the same key. One can do statistical analysis and able to recover the data and do other things. So that way, these crack attacks are, they are also on WPA2 enterprise as well, not just on WPA2 personal. And denial of service and AP configuration, these are always there because many manufacturers of the Wi-Fi access points don't give you AP configuration over HTTPS, because that means you should have one digital certificate purchased for the access point and installed on the access point, and that has to be renewed regularly. There's a lot of hassle out there in terms of purchasing and renewing the digital certificates the way you use it for websites. Now we have to do it even for the access point for controlling or managing the access point. It is a lot of work. That's the reason why many manufacturers of the Wi-Fi access points don't give the configuration over HTTPS. Denial of service, no matter what is the technology, one can launch denial of service attacks. But some of these attacks are taken care in WPA3 that I will summarize at the end of this talk. So this is related to offline dictionary attack. I think in the interest of the time, I don't play this. But the point I wanted to convey how it happens is, this is the message, the four-way handshake that you see it here, where the message tool that goes from the client to the access point contains some text in plain text, some text encrypted using the key that is there at the client and AP. So what attacker can do is, attacker who is having a password bank with millions of passwords, he also can generate the PTK for each of the password that is out there in the database. What the attacker will do is, he will take this plain text and encrypt using the potential PTK that attacker has generated, and checks the encrypted the message integrity check, whatever the hash of this particular thing is matching with this. If both of them are matching, it means that the potential PTK, whatever the attacker has generated using a password in the password bank, is indeed the password or passphrase used by the user for the WPA2 PSK access point. And again, I just briefly talked about crack earlier. So this is discovered by Matthew Van Hove from KU Leuven in 2017. So this is a kind of weakness or ambiguity in Wi-Fi security standard that is out there. Now I'll talk quickly about what is out there in WPA3, how it is going to help you to address some of the issues in WPA2. One of the remarkable features of WPA3 is called OW, which stands for Opportunistic Wireless Encryption for Open SSIDs. Basically, if you recall our discussion about open Wi-Fi access points in the beginning in public environments, I was telling that all the communication between the client and access point goes in plain text. But so one of the things that has been done here is, as part of WPA3, is how to make sure that the communication between client and access points happen over a secure medium, even though there is no authentication of the clients by the access point. So it is very similar to the way when you visit something like a Hindu website, which is on HTTPS. As you see here, you are connected to the hindu.com over a secure channel. That way, nobody knows that you are reading the news from hindu.com except your computer and the web server of the hindu.com, because the pipe between your computer and hindu.com web server is encrypted. So similar kind of functionality has been brought into WPA2. Without authentication, it provides you encryption. So same thing, we can get it. So how it has done this is by using something called Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Same Diffie-Hellman key exchange we use in TLS, especially as part of TLS 1.3, which has become the de facto standard for key exchange, where two parties who have no knowledge about each other can derive a common secret key without requiring any digital certificates. That's the beauty of the Diffie-Hellman key exchange algorithm. Same thing has been brought into WPA3 WoW to address the problem of providing authentication or encryption without authentication. Okay, and yeah, it works to a greater extent, but still the issue that is out there, one has to be really cautious here is, still one can set up rogue access point. I was mentioning only the link between your device and the access point is encrypted, but there's no guarantee that you are talking with the right access point, because it does only the one side of the, because it doesn't provide any kind of authentication here. But if you really are interested in authentication for the client side, yes, you can use captive portals with the OTP and other things. But the server side, yeah, there is no solution for the server side authentication. And another feature that is out there as part of the WPA3 is called Dragonfly. So if you recall, I was talking about using password banks to crack the passwords in offline, especially for WPA2 PSK mode. See, as the length of the password increases, the time taken to crack the passwords and even other thing, especially in the brute force, increases. But if it is a password bank, as long as your password is in the password bank, the offline dictionary attack can crack it. So the idea here behind Dragonfly is how we can still make the user to set and use very simple passwords like your pet name and your name kind of thing. And still we have the security at a very high level. So that is the principle behind getting this Dragonfly. Again, it uses the same Diffie-Hellman key exchange, but here it uses the Diffie-Hellman key exchange not only for key derivation, it also uses it for the mutual authentication. That way you can get both the mutual authentication and key exchange by using the Diffie-Hellman algorithm here. And this we can use it as part of the WPA3 PSK, so that we can happily live with simple passwords for your Wi-Fi access points. And one other beautiful feature of WPA3, which was not there in WPA2, was forward secrecy. So what forward secrecy basically means is that, let's assume that in future, somebody catch hold of the packet trace of the Wi-Fi packets exchange between the client and access points. Is it possible for somebody to crack the thing? So that is what we are interested here. By forward secrecy, what it means is, even if somebody gets hold of the packet trace between the client and access point, it is not possible for somebody to decrypt, unlike what was possible in WPA2. So in WPA2, there was no forward secrecy. That means if I get hold of the packet that are exchanged, let's say in our college, and if you tell me what is the passphrase that are used, or if I can crack the passphrase using the offline dictionary attack, I can get to know how and what messages are exchanged in your campus last year or even 5 years ago. So there was no forward secrecy in WPA2. But WPA3, because it uses only transient things which are not tied with the passwords as part of WPA3, we have forward secrecy. Same thing even we use in TLS 1.3, which also offers forward secrecy. And for administrators, there are a few guidelines that have kept it here that one can be watchful out. One is one should be using 802.1x based authentication and should enable the protected managed frames. So what I mean is, especially in the enterprise environment, you should not be using WPA2 PSK, you should be using WPA2 enterprise, where you get to use this 802.1x, which is based on port-based access and authentication. And also WPA3 and even WPA2 also optionally support this protected management frames. So you should better enable it so that we can make sure that whoever is snooping into the communication cannot launch these bogus or kind of spurious de-authentication and disassociation messages. Ideally, you should let only the access point send these messages, not the attackers. So by protecting the management frames, you can make sure that those kind of DOS attacks can be prevented. And you should only allow specific devices to access your Wi-Fi network. So you can use the filtering at the MAC level, or even we can use the filtering at the IP level, so that we can make sure that other users are not coming into your campus or enterprise networks. And one can also install either wireless intrusion prevention systems or the firewalls, and including antivirus, to make sure that your Wi-Fi environment or enterprise environment is protected. And you should never ever start using the default passwords that come with the device. Not only for administration control, for configuration of the device, also for the SSIDs and the default password. You should better change it immediately. And you should turn off the SSID broadcasting if possible. It is doable all the time. And you can apply the patches and deploy WPA3 as soon as possible, because we can buy WPA3 devices for the same price of WPA2 devices now. They're available in the market. And I think that's all I have now. So one last point before I conclude the talk is, so the cryptography and other solution that I'm talking about, they work only when we use them correctly. But it is not the solution for all our security problems. So one can use a very simple social engineering attacks, or one can use other kind of smart tricks to fool the users and steal the valuable information from you, rather than worrying about what is WPA2, WPA3, and how to crack the passwords. So that way, one has to be really cautious about doing things in cyber world. Always be vigilant and very careful. Otherwise, social engineering will make you very, very vulnerable, even though nobody has really bothered about launching these kind of sophisticated attacks by understanding the Wi-Fi protocols and other nitty-gritty out there. So I have some references and some video links here. You can go through them to get more idea about what I'm talking in this talk. So these are all the various playlists and demonstration videos that I was trying to tell you earlier. So if you are interested more about understanding Wi-Fi security and what is still possible and how you can make your environment more safe, you better watch out all these things and make good use of them for your day-to-day life. Thank you. I think I have taken 5-10 minutes extra, and if there are any questions, I think I can spend some time in answering them. Thank you, guys.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much for your nice explanation, sir. Here we have different questions from participant side. Can I proceed, sir?
Oh, please, please.
Yeah. Up to so far, is there any mechanism which can absolutely prevent from attacks?
So your question is, so I was telling you, right? I think if you look at my concluding slide, forget about these cyber attacks, forget about these Wi-Fi attacks, social engineering attacks, where somebody says that, okay, if you fill in this form and provide your KYC and you will be getting $100 Google Pay credit. So these kind of simple social engineering attacks, or even the phone calls and other SMSs that you receive, where you win the lottery, they really fool you and reveal all your credentials and make your life vulnerable. There's nothing like that. One has to be vigilant, and it's more like a virus and antivirus kind of thing. So no matter how strong your antivirus, tomorrow there could be a new virus that somebody may be designing, which no antivirus might have even thought about it, right? So same thing even in this here also, cyber attacks. Here attackers are kind of exploiting something that is not fixed so far. And now it is also the responsibility of the operating developers and application developers to really understand their software and their systems are not having this kind of vulnerabilities. But again, you know, right, every other day you hear about lots of attacks and lots of issues in cyber world. That's because the attack surface has been exploding, because everything is digitally connected, everything is connected, and everything is out there for somebody to hack into or exploit out there. So unless you spend your resources in understanding and securing the thing, it is really challenging to be securing in cyberspace, unlike in physical space.
Yes, sir. One more question I have, sir.
Yeah, please.
Currently, which is the best firewall that can prevent from middleman?
Oh, man in the middle attack you are talking about.
Yeah, sir.
Again, so if you look at the man in the middle, this man in the middle could be anywhere in the path. So if from your computer to the router, to the firewall, to the routers in internet, to the web server that are out there, the man in the middle attacker could be lurking anywhere in the entire path. So the firewall may not completely guard you against, but again, firewall many times, again, if you look, I think your college also may have the firewall. The job of the firewall is see when there is any malicious traffic coming to the network. When I say malicious, for example, you are browsing a website, assume that that website has certain malware, and there's a pop-up that comes and you click it, and unknowingly you will be giving a permission to install that executable file which is installing a ransomware. This firewall can prevent it, because firewall most likely has been configured with signatures for the known attacks and known malware and ransomware. Because of that, firewall can prevent it. But when I was talking about the man in the middle, especially the case where if the man in the middle is only snooping into the communication, that means he is only listening to what is happening between the client. It is like a kind of a silent guy. Like he is watching what is happening. We cannot stop somebody from watching, right? So the only way to address this man in the middle is by properly configuring your systems. And again, the man in the middle is very prevalent in the case of even in the cyber world, where we talk about TLS and downgrading of the TLS protocols and TLS standards. If your website is not configured properly with the TLS, where the attacker can downgrade your TLS version and fool the client also to use the lower version, in that case, this guy comes nicely between these two. So that way, yeah, there is no firewall, and as such, that can prevent anything.
Thank you, sir. HOD, sir.
Any other questions from anyone?
Yeah.
Krishna, you pass concluding remarks today's session. Thank you, Bhimarjan Reddy garu, for your valuable session. It is really wonderful, like Wi-Fi also. It is very complex. And also you have thrown light on different aspects of Wi-Fi, what are threats and what are solutions also. Really, it is a very good session. But this 5-day program and the first day, and I must say thank you very much, sir. And Tulsi Krishna, you want to add anything?
Yes, yes. Sir, nowadays we are facing a lot of security issues in the network. You can solve by using the different techniques, sir. It is just explained by you, sir. Your session is very good, sir, useful and explanation. This session will be enhance the knowledge of faculty members. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah, thank you, Tulsi Krishna. Thank you, Rammohan Reddy Garu.
Sir,
Sir,
one more minute. We would like to appreciate your contribution towards the session, sir. Please accept our certificate of appreciation from our college and as well as our department, sir.
Oh, sure, Purnima. Thank you. Yeah, we will definitely accept your thing. Oh, you have some.
Yeah, sir.
Oh, really? Okay.
Once again, thank you for your valuable time and your session, sir.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, sir. HOD, sir, can I close the session?
Yes, you can close.
Okay, yes. I think thank you all. And
thank you.
I think once again, let me thank you, Tulsi and others for giving this opportunity. I hope it is of some use for all of you. Yes. And if you want to know more or if you have any other queries, feel free to write to me. I will be happy to answer them.
Sure, sir. Sure, sir. Thank you, sir.
All the best.
Thank you,
stay safe in your campus. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Online. Thank you very much for their patience, learning, hearing. Okay.
Sir.
And we can conclude this session.
Yes, sir.
But
so always I would like to extend a sincere thanks to our management. And
also who are watching the YouTube also. Thank you very much for all the participants. So tomorrow also at the same time, we start by 2:30 by the other resource person. Please, all of you, please attend. Thank you very much. Tulsi, you want to add anything?
Okay. Madam, conclude, madam.
Yes, sir.
No problem.
The tomorrow's session will be handled by Dr. Naveen Kumar, sir, on the topic of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So we will share the program link through our WhatsApp groups. So as usual, thank you for the opportunity from our management, sir.
By 2 o'clock we will hear, we start by 2, just like today.
Sir. Yes, sir. From tomorrow onwards, the session will start at 2:30 only, sir. 2:30 to 4. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Participants. Right. Right. We'll leave the meeting. Okay, na?
Okay, sir. Bye, sir.
We'll leave the meeting.